October 19th, 1997. A nationally televised game. Millions of people watching from their living rooms across America. And on the Oakland Raiders sideline, a volcano was about to erupt. Jeff George, the quarterback with the golden arm, the man who was supposed to save the franchise, stood face to face with head coach Joe Bugel. Their noses were inches apart. Veins bulged from necks, fingers jabbed into chests. The argument was not private. Cameras captured every second. Microphones picked up the venom in their voices. Teammates stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or watch the franchise implode in real time. In that moment, something shattered beyond repair. Not just a relationship between a coach and his quarterback, not just a season spiraling toward disaster, but the entire career of a man who possessed more natural talent than almost any quarterback who ever lived. Jeff George had the strongest arm scouts had ever seen. He had the prototype body, the quick release, the football intelligence. He had everything required to become a Hall of Famer, a legend, a name spoken alongside the greatest to ever play the position. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, a wanderer, a man who bounced from city to city, burning bridges everywhere he went until no team in the National Football League would even return his phone calls. This is the story of Jeff George, the quarterback who had it all and lost it all. The man the Raiders did not just bench, did not just trade, did not just release. The man the Raiders broke. To understand how Jeff George ended up screaming at his head coach on national television, you must travel back to the beginning, to a small town in Indiana where a boy with a rocket launcher attached to his shoulder first discovered he was different. Jeff George grew up in Indianapolis. Football was in his blood. His father had played. His uncles had played. The expectation that he would play was never questioned. But nobody expected what happened next. By his sophomore year of high school, college scouts were already making the pilgrimage to watch him throw. Word had spread through coaching circles that there was a kid in Indiana with an arm unlike anything anyone had witnessed in decades. The reports sounded exaggerated. They were not. Jeff George could throw a football 70 yards with the flick of his wrist. He could fire bullets into tight windows that other quarterbacks would never even attempt. His release was so quick that defenders would still be dropping into coverage when the ball was already arriving at the receiver's hands. One scout famously said that watching Jeff George throw was like watching a cheat code come to life. The laws of physics that applied to other quarterbacks simply did not apply to him. By the time he reached the University of Illinois, the hype had reached deafening levels. He was not just considered a future NFL quarterback, he was considered a future franchise savior, a generational talent, the next great gunslinger. And in 1990, the Indianapolis Colts made it official. With the first overall pick in the NFL draft, the Colts selected Jeff George. They traded multiple picks to move up and get him. They handed him a 6-year contract worth $15 million, making him the highest-paid player in the league before he had taken a single professional snap. The city of Indianapolis celebrated. Their hometown hero was coming home. The future was blindingly bright. Nobody saw the darkness that was already forming beneath the surface. The problem started almost immediately. Jeff George expected to walk into the Colts facility and become the unquestioned starter. He expected the organization to build around him, to cater to him, to treat him like the superstar his contract said he was. The veterans on the team saw it differently. They saw a rookie who had not earned anything yet, a young man with an inflated ego and a sense of entitlement that rubbed them the wrong way. They saw someone who acted like the rules applied to everyone except him. Whispers began circulating through the locker room. Jeff George does not put in the extra film work. Jeff George questions the coaching staff's decisions. Jeff George believes he is smarter than everyone in the building. On the field, his talent remained undeniable. That arm was everything scouts had promised and more. There were throws that made even cynical NFL observers shake their heads in disbelief. But football is not played by arms alone. Jeff George struggled to read defenses at the professional level. His decision-making was erratic. When plays broke down, his frustration would boil over, leading to turnovers and tirades. In 4 seasons with Indianapolis, the Colts went 21-43. Playoff appearances were non-existent. The hometown hero narrative had curdled into something much uglier. Fans who once cheered his arrival now booed his every incompletion. The media that had celebrated his potential now questioned his character. The organization that had invested so heavily in him started looking for an exit strategy. In 1994, the Colts traded Jeff George to the Atlanta Falcons. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new city, a new coaching staff, a chance to prove that the Indianapolis disaster was about circumstances, not character. For exactly 1 season, it actually worked. In 1995, Jeff George played the best football of his career. He threw for over 4,000 yards, he led the Falcons to the playoffs, he showed glimpses of the quarterback everyone believed he could become. But then, the old patterns returned. He clashed with head coach June Jones. He challenged play calls. He made it clear through his body language and his words that he believed he knew better than the men paid to lead the team. After just 2 seasons in Atlanta, Jeff George was once again looking for a new home. His reputation now preceded him wherever he went. Talented but toxic, gifted but difficult, a quarterback who could make any throw but could not make peace with any coaching staff. Enter the Oakland Raiders. When Al Davis signed Jeff George in 1997, the football world raised a collective eyebrow. The Raiders were struggling. Their glory days of the 70s and 80s felt like ancient history. They needed a spark, a playmaker, someone who could restore the fear that opponents once felt when facing the silver and black. Al Davis believed Jeff George could be that someone. The legendary owner had always been attracted to arm strength. He worshipped the deep ball, the vertical passing game, the ability to stretch defenses until they snapped. Jeff George had the most powerful arm Davis had ever personally witnessed. More importantly, Al Davis believed he could succeed where others had failed. He believed the Raiders' culture, built on misfits and rebels, would embrace Jeff George rather than reject him. He believed that a man who did not fit in anywhere else might finally fit in Oakland. For a few weeks, it seemed like he was right. Jeff George opened the 1997 season with impressive performances. His arm looked as electric as ever. The Raiders' offense, dormant for years, suddenly had a pulse. Fans allowed themselves to dream again. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe Jeff George just needed the right environment. Maybe the Raiders had unlocked something that the Colts and Falcons could not. Then came October 19th. The Raiders were playing the Atlanta Falcons, Jeff George's former team. Emotions were already running high. This was personal for him in ways that went beyond a normal regular season game. And the game was going poorly. The offense sputtered, passes fell incomplete, drives stalled in frustrating fashion. The frustration that had always simmered beneath Jeff George's surface began rising toward a boil. On the sideline, head coach Joe Bugel tried to discuss adjustments. What happened next would be replayed on sports networks for decades. Jeff George did not just disagree with his coach, he confronted him, he screamed at him, he jabbed his finger in a display of insubordination that shocked everyone watching. The cameras captured all of it. The rage in his eyes, the veins in his neck, the complete breakdown of the coach-player relationship in full public view. When the game ended, Jeff George's time with the Raiders was effectively over. The organization released him almost immediately. Al Davis, the man who had taken a chance on him, who'd believed he could rehabilitate his career, issued a statement that was coldly professional. There was no anger in the words, just finality. Jeff George was gone, and this time there would be no resurrection.
The years that followed were a slow, painful descent into irrelevance. Jeff George bounced from team to team like a basketball with a slow leak, each stop shorter and less significant than the last. The Minnesota Vikings gave him a chance. The Washington Redskins gave him a look. The Seattle Seahawks brought him to training camp. None of it lasted. His arm remained strong. Even in his mid-30s, he could still make throws that most quarterbacks could only dream about. But no organization wanted to deal with the baggage that came attached to that arm. He had become radioactive, a cautionary tale that general managers whispered about when evaluating quarterbacks with questionable attitudes. The name Jeff George had transformed from a symbol of potential into a warning sign. By 2001, his NFL career was over. Not because his body had failed him, not because his arm had weakened, but because he had exhausted every opportunity, burned every bridge, and tested every limit until no doors remained. The man who was once the highest-paid player in the league, the #1 overall pick, the quarterback with the golden arm, was 33 years old and unemployable. What makes the Jeff George story so haunting is not the failure itself. Players fail all the time. Careers end prematurely for countless reasons. What makes it haunting is the waste. Jeff George possessed physical gifts that appear perhaps once in a generation. His arm strength was compared to John Elway, to Dan Marino, to the greatest throwers who ever played the position. Scouts who spent their entire lives evaluating quarterbacks said they had never seen anything quite like it. And none of it mattered. Because Jeff George never understood that football is a team sport played by human beings who require trust, respect, and cohesion to succeed. He never grasped the talent without
Humility is a weapon that eventually turns on its owner. He never learned the lesson that every great quarterback must learn, that leading men requires listening to them first. The Raiders did not break Jeff George in the traditional sense. They did not injure him. They did not betray him. They did not set him up to fail. They simply provided the stage for his final, fatal act of self-destruction. The confrontation with Joe Bugel was not caused by the Raiders organization. It was caused by patterns of behavior that Jeff George had carried with him his entire career. Oakland was just where it finally became undeniable, where the cameras captured what had always been true, where the whole world saw what scouts, coaches, and teammates had been whispering about for years. Today, Jeff George is largely forgotten. His name does not appear on Hall of Fame ballots. His jerseys do not hang in stadiums. Young fans who never watched him play have no idea he ever existed. But for those who remember, his story serves as a powerful reminder. Talent is a gift, but character is a choice. The NFL is littered with players who had all the physical tools and none of the personal qualities required to build a legacy. Jeff George stands near the top of that unfortunate list. He could have been one of the greatest quarterbacks in Raiders history. He could have brought championships back to Oakland. He could have had his number retired, his bust enshrined, his name spoken with reverence for generations. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, a ghost story that coaches tell young quarterbacks when they start believing their own hype. And somewhere, perhaps, there is a man approaching 60 years old who still possesses the strongest arm in any room he enters. A man who still remembers what it felt like to throw a football 70 yards, to hear the crowd roar, to believe that the whole world was his for the taking. A man who knows, better than anyone, the price of wasted potential. The Raiders have seen many quarterbacks come and go. Some became legends, some became footnotes, and some became warnings about what happens when talent and temperament cannot coexist. Jeff George belongs in that final category. Brilliant, troubled, broken. If this story of wasted greatness moved you, if it made you think about what separates the good from the truly great, then subscribe to this channel and join Raider Nation as we continue exploring the incredible history of the silver and black. Leave a comment telling me which Raider quarterback you want me to cover next. The legends, the disasters, the ones who almost were? I want to hear from you. And share this video with anyone who needs to understand that in football, just like in life, talent alone is never enough. Until next time, commitment to excellence.